Welcome to the Asteraceae. This is the family that I cautioned you against trying to use members of for the flower analysis activity because, well, the flower is a little bit intricate and confusing for beginners. But we're not beginners anymore. And the basic story is that what looks like an individual flower, what looks like a blossom, is a whole bunch of them packed together into an inflorescence that's called a capitulum. And the flowers are kind of modified. Let's look and see how. Well, basically, here is a picture of a type of Asteraceae capitulum, which looks like a flower. And what look like petals are actually flowers. They're called ray flowers. They're kind of like the rays of the sun, sort of makes sense. And in the center, what looks like, what would be the sexual parts of the flowers, those are called disc flowers. And they actually are many, many flowers packed together. So basically what this type of arrangement does is it allows a lot of flowers to be pollinated sort of sequentially by a visitor and like an assembly line. So here we have this swallowtail butterfly that's sipping nectar from a whole lot of flowers, likely pollinating these flowers. It's like a mass production kind of thing, which is the advantage of this type of flower arrangement and capitulum type. On the undersurface of the inflorescence, remember a cluster of flowers is an inflorescence, and when there's a lot of flowers together, they're often subtended by leafy appendages called bracts. Involucral bracts that form like a rosette just beneath the flowers. We saw this in the Apiaceae, like Queen Anne's lace has really feathery involucral bracts. Well, in the in the Asteraceae, in this family, the involucral bracts they're noteworthy. They kind of look like the sepals of this, if this were a flower, which it isn't. They're called phyllaries. That's the special name for the involucral bracts of the Asteraceae. And, oh, by the way, artichokes. You know those big globe-like things with all the scales that you pull off and pull through your teeth? That's actually a big thistle, and it's sort of in the bud stage of capitulum of a big thistle. And what you pull off and eat when you eat artichokes, not the heart, but the leafy part, those are the involucral bracts of a big thistle-like plant. So here's a picture that shows the individual flowers a little bit better. And what we have here is these ray flowers, which actually are sterile. They don't produce fruits, but they have expanded corolla that makes it be very attractive to pollinators. And each one of these little facets is a flower with all the parts you would expect a flower to have, but just looking a little different. All right, we've delayed it long enough. I must sketch. So what I would like to do is attempt to draw an Asteraceae a disc flower. And this is an activity which would work a little better if we actually had a disc flower to analyze at the same time, but novel coronavirus, So I'm going to draw one of these individual facets. I'm going to back a little tiny bit. So if you remove one of these that I just drew a circle around in the center and analyzed it, we're going to go from the bottom to the top the way we do, and what you would see in the bottom would be something kind of like a sunflower seed, and then you would see some little appendages coming off of it, and then you would see the colorful parts with some lobes. There basically could be 5 of them, but it's hard to draw with the right perspective. Okay, and then projecting above that, you would see like a tube, and then coming out of the top of the tube, little rabbit ears. And I'm going to draw a dotted line that shows where that rabbit ears would connect. And this is one of the flowers types that's in a typical Asteraceae capitulum. These are the ones in the center. And let's label the parts. This is the ovary, way down here at the bottom. So what is the flower type and ovary position of the Asteraceae? Epigynous, with an inferior ovary. Next up would be, as you would expect, the sepals. And it turns out that the sepals in the Asteraceae are highly modified. And they don't usually look like, don't ever look like 5 leaf-like appendages. So it's so highly modified. It's called the pappus. Sometimes it's scales, sometimes it's bristles, sometimes it's the fluffy puffy like in a dandelion head. So that's what the pappus is. It's modified sepals. It's the calyx basically, but it's highly modified. Boom. Next up, the corolla. So the corolla in the Asteraceae is notice that the flower parts are fused. So it has, it's some fusion of parts going on here, and the number of parts, there's 5. I drew 4. That's probably bad perspective because really you wouldn't see that many in this view, but it's a 5-lobed corolla, 5 petals fused together. So what's next? What's next is more sexual parts of the flower. Well, it turns out that the stamens in the Asteraceae are fused into a tube. So it's like a hollow tube, kind of like toilet paper tube or something. And so I'm going to write tube in parentheses. And basically, what's special about the stamens is, in fact, I'm going to mention that too. It's really important. They're fused together by their anthers. And what they do is they dehisce indorsally. I like saying that. What it means is they split open towards the inside. So the pollen, instead of being presented on puffy little stamens that's like stuck out of the flower, they release their pollen on the inside of this tube. Well, how does it get out into the world? Well, here's this. These are the styles or stigmas. That's both actually. I'm going to write style branches. It's the top of the gynoecium. And remember, this has an inferior ovary, so the ovary is way down here. So this dotted line that I drew is the style connecting. I should actually write stigma branches. The distinction is not always made as clearly as it should. So that's the style. I'm going to draw that if I can find my cursor. There you are. Boom. So that's basically what the disc flowers are like in the Asteraceae. And hey, let's think about FENSH, F-E-N-S-H, free equal numerous spiral hypogynous, the characteristics of primitive ancestral type, not very modified flowers. Flower parts, are they free from each other? No. The corolla, lobes of the corolla, they're fused together. Nope, not F, equal. Well, in this case, there is radial symmetry, but I'm going to jump over and take a look at a ray flower. So I'm going to pause and take a picture of a ray flower. You know what I mean. And the ray flower might have an ovary, and it might have a pappus. And the corolla is basically just like that. Always looks like Bart Simpson when I draw that. It might be a style. And what I'd like you to see about the ray flower, it's strongly zygomorphic. It's not a tube, it's flattened out. And this is one of the, it's not really bilaterally symmetrical, it's really irregular, but it's totally not radial. So the equal part of FENSH is definitely violated with the ray flowers. Numerous flower parts, 5. That's not numerous. They're definitely not spiral. And flower type and ovary position, as mentioned, epigynous with an inferior ovary. So I'm going to write the word FENSH, which isn't a word, but it's an honorary word. And I'm going to cross out all of the letters in it because these are not free, they are not equal, they are not numerous, they are not spiral, and they are not hypogynous. The Asteraceae are among our most highly evolved, highly modified, advanced plant families of them all. Oh, by the way, among monocots, the orchids are the ones that depart the most from the FENSH primitive arrangement. So, what I didn't mention about this configuration is, I began to, pollination. The pollination of the Asteraceae has an interesting peculiarity, is that the pollen is, when these style branches grow up, I'm drawing on top of the style branches, when these stigmas, I should say better, grow up through the tube of stamens, which have dehisced intraorsally, which have released pollen. The pollen is presented to the world on the actually on the backs of the style branches. I probably should have drawn it down there. Sorry, flower. Did I just apologize to a flower? Sure. And it's not self-pollination, even though it looks like it, because number one, it's not deposited on the right part of the stigma, and number two, most of these are self-incompatible and can't self-pollinate that way. The pollen is presented on the stigmas because it gets pushed up through the styles. Through the stamen tube. Kind of an unusual thing. So that drawing wasn't as much a disaster as I thought it would be. But do you have any pictures? Turns out I do. So this is a sunflower, and here we have down at the bottom. Here we have down at the bottom the ovary. I'm gonna increase my drawing potential here. Here we have down at the bottom the ovary, and attached to at the top of it is the modified sepals. It's called the pappus. Look at the corolla. We see 5 lovely corolla lobes, and here, looking like a dark tube with some ridges on it, those are the anthers, all fused together, dehiscing intraorsally, and these pollen that you can see is actually on the back of the stigmas. It's presented on the stigmas. Those are the disc flowers of the sunflower. The ray flowers, they're usually sterile and neuter. They don't actually produce fruit, but their job is to be showy, advertising, act like petals. And that's the flowers of the Asteraceae. Some interesting diagnostic or identification tips. Here's 2 species of coneflower in the genus Rudbeckia. One of them has these like fist-like styles, and one of them has really slender styles. So you have to look really carefully at the style branches. This is Chicory. Chicory is a member of a subfamily of the Asteraceae that has flowers that are all those strap-shaped ones. It's kind of like all ray flowers. It doesn't have disc flowers. And it's kind of a big subfamily. It includes chicory, it includes dandelions, it includes lettuce. And so that's a kind of a weedy but much beloved because of the color. It's cheerful in August, roadside weed, chicory. As mentioned before, the flowers have 5 parts, not numerous, not spiral. Petals are fused, not free. The ray flowers, not equal, and they're epigenous. They depart from all those 5 primitive traits. Here's something that doesn't look very asteraceous, but it is. It's ragweed. Ragweed is wind-pollinated, so it doesn't have those showy flowers. It's also got unisexual flowers, unusual in the Asteraceae. Ragweed, I think of as having a pollination syndrome that's kind of like forest trees. You remember oaks and hickories and walnut? They have male flowers and catkins that are easy to have the wind pick up the pollen and blow it away. And the female flowers are on the same plant, and they're larger and fewer in number. Ragweed is like that. Here, these are the male flowers, very small, a bunch of them on the one little axis. And these larger things down at the base, those are the female flowers. That's ragweed. It's wind-pollinated, causes allergy in some people. Goldenrod, poor goldenrod. Goldenrod is a victim of just by guilt by association. It flowers about the same time as ragweed does, and so people see the conspicuous goldenrod, sneeze a bunch, and blame the goldenrod. I'm innocent, I tell you. It's not wind-pollinated, which is why it's all showy and colorful. Its pollen doesn't blow through the air. It doesn't cause allergy. It gets a bad rap. Here's a lovely native annual in the Asteraceae. It's called beggar's ticks. Its fruits have spiny pappus that sticks to you as you walk by. Here's a close-up of the ray. I don't mean ray, I mean the disc flowers of the beggar sticks. Here's what is called aster. It used to be considered to be in the genus Aster, but some researchers have determined that aster is actually a European group of plants. So most of our asters are now in the genus Symphyotrichum. This is called New England aster. It's a common wildflower. A lot of these guys flower in the late summer and the fall. Here's another aster that flowers in the late summer and fall. It's called Eastern Lined Aster. This is tall Coreopsis. It's a prairie wildflower. I like that butterfly. It seems to be the same color as the flowers it's visiting. Pilewort, or American fireweed. This is an aster that happens not to have, when I say aster, I mean member of the aster family. This is one that happens not to have any ray flowers. So it's a rayless composite. Composite is a nickname for the Asteraceae, because many of them have these, because they have these aggregated inflorescences that are composites of small flowers. It's a self-pollinating, weedy annual that's easy to miss because it's not very showy. Pilewort. It's a native plant, however. Here's a plant that grows in the understory of woods. It's quite common. It's called white snake root. It's famous because it causes a kind of a milk sickness. If cattle, or I guess any other animals that you're going to get milk from, eat it, the milk becomes poisonous. And this was a very, very serious problem in colonial times before people realized what was the cause of it. In fact, it famously killed the mother of Abraham Lincoln. This is a lovely, in my opinion, somewhat overrated, but much beloved wildflower in the aster family that grows in the United States, only in Ohio. It also grows in areas of Canada that are similar geology. The geology is alvars, dry limestone flats near the lake, and it's called Lakeside Daisy. It's not really a daisy, and it's a federally endangered species, and it's the only federally endangered species whose only occurrence in the United States is in Ohio. So it's a plant that a lot of Ohio plant lovers especially love. Lakeside Daisy, Hymenopsis herbaceae. Here's a plant called oxeye. Looks like sunflower. It's a little subtle difference, kind of insider baseball, but let me show you. The ray flowers of sunflowers, which this isn't, notice the specific epithet, helianthoides. That means it looks like a helianthus, which is the sunflower, are sterile and don't produce fruit. But here, this is a ray flower. I'm drawing a circle around the plump ovary that develops a fruit. So in Coleopsis, the ray flowers produce fruit, whereas in helianthus, they don't. Wow. Here's some of my faves. It's called prairie dock. Silphium terebinthinaceum. No, Silphium terebinthinaceum. Prairie dock and other species of silphium are some common prairie plants and some common low wet woods edges plants. And here's a lovely prairie dock. It's a very, very long-lived perennial with a really deep, deep taproot. Has big, broad leaves about the size of frying pans. And this is growing at the edge of a prairie remnant in Marion County. And here's a prairie remnant in Wyandotte County, where there's a lot of this prairie dock, Silphium terebinthinaceum. Something noteworthy about the genus Silphium, is that unusually the disc flowers are not seed producing. They only produce stamens, and they have this column that presents the pollen. But there's no fruits from these disc flowers. The fruits in Silphium are from the ray flowers. So these fruits are only at the periphery of the flower because only the ray flowers produce the fruits. It's a Silphium thing. Here's a sunflower, the genus Helianthus, which means sunflower. This is Sawtooth Sunflower, a lovely native wildflower. This is a goldenrod. There's a number of species of goldenrod. Some are very common and some are not common. This one is common. It's Canada goldenrod. Solidago canadensis. Here's an unusual prairie goldenrod. It's called stiff goldenrod, Solidago rigida. Beautiful color, thick, short, sandpapery leaves. Here's a plant it's an annual, almost a weed, but it's a native plant deserving of a little more respect than it gets. It grows in like pond edges, and it's called cocklebur. This is another one that has unisexual flowers. So these are the fruits that came from the female flowers, and this is where the male flowers were. Kind of unusual to be like that. And one of the noteworthy things about cocklebur is that it was the favorite food of the now extinct Carolina parakeet. This is Audubon's picture of the Carolina parakeet. Look, they're feasting on the cocklebur. So if you want to manage for Carolina parakeet, plant cocklebur. So, as is typical for our widely developed plant families with a lot of species, some of the species are weeds. And one of the worst weeds, not so much in natural ecosystems, but in farm fields and along roadsides and in prairies sometimes, restored prairies especially, is a thistle. And, oh, this is a mistake. What was I thinking? It must have been late at night, because I want to point this out. It's totally not Cirsium canadense. It's totally Cirsium arvense. And what's of note about so-called Canada thistle is that it's not Canadian. It's not native to North America. It became established in Canada first and got to be called Canada thistle. And I was so accustomed to the thought that I just translated it by mistake. Cirsium arvense, Canada thistle, but it's not from Canada. It's likewise, by the way, Kentucky bluegrass, also not native, not from Kentucky. And this is a plant that's really common along the roadsides, and it's a bit of a weed. Boo hiss, Canada thistle. So, to summarize, Asteraceae, what looks like an individual flower is actually a head-like group of flowers, many small flowers packed into a really tight space. And here's Roger Torrey Peterson's lovely little icon. And look at all those little facets, very descriptive of Asteraceae, the aster family.